What did you bring to this court?
Dates, photos, proof.
Emergency order, no contact, effective immediately.
The zipper sounded too loud in the courtroom. Not because it was loud, because everything else had gone quiet. Jade Thompson stood at the witness table with a backpack in front of her, scuffed black canvas, one broken strap stitched back together with thick thread. She was 16, tall and thin, shoulders slightly hunched like she was bracing for impact, even while standing still. Her hands shook as she opened the bag. Across the aisle, her mother stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, lips tight in a line that used to mean, "At home, don't embarrass me." Next to her mother sat Derek Landry, her stepfather, hands folded, face calm, eyes bored. The kind of calm that made people assume he couldn't possibly be the problem. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Thompson," Judge Camille Arden said, voice measured, "you asked to address the court directly." Jade swallowed. Her throat felt dry, like her body had turned water into fear. "Yes, Your Honor," she whispered. "And you brought something with you," the judge said. Jade nodded, then reached into the backpack. The first thing she pulled out wasn't dramatic. It was a notebook, black cover, soft corners, the kind you buy for $2 and never expect to matter. She set it on the table. Then she pulled out a small envelope stuffed with glossy prints, photos slightly bent at the edges, each one with a date stamped in the corner like a countdown. The courtroom didn't move. No coughs, no shifting. Even the bailiff looked like he'd stopped breathing. Judge Arden's eyes narrowed. "What is that?" she asked. Jade's voice cracked. "My diary," she said. "And pictures." Derek's eyes flicked toward the photos for half a second, just enough to show recognition, then returned to the judge like nothing was happening. Jade took a breath. "I didn't want to bring this here," she said, "but nobody believed me, and every time I tried to talk, they said I was lying, or being dramatic, or trying to get attention." Her mother's attorney stood. "Your Honor," Judge Arden lifted a hand. "Sit down," she said. "Let her speak." Jade's fingers trembled as she opened the notebook to a page marked with a torn corner. She didn't read like someone performing. She read like someone trying to survive. "March 14th, Jade said, voice shaking. "He said if I tell anyone, he'll make sure I end up somewhere worse. Mom told me to stop crying and stop making him mad." A murmur moved through the gallery. Jade turned the page. "April 2nd, she continued. "He grabbed my wrist so hard it left fingerprints. I wore long sleeves to school. Ms. Patel asked if I was okay. I said I fell." Judge Arden's face tightened. Jade slid one photo forward. A close-up of a wrist, dark bruises, finger-shaped. She slid another, a shoulder mottled purple and yellow. Another, a small cut at the corner of her lip. Another, a screenshot of a text message from her mother. "Don't say anything at school. You're going to ruin us." Jade's breathing turned shallow. Judge Arden looked down at the prints, then at the diary, then back at Jade. "Ms. Thompson," the judge said softly, "how long has this been going on?" Jade's eyes filled. "A long time," she whispered, "since I was 13. The judge sat back slowly, as if she needed a second to keep her own voice steady. Then she turned her gaze to Derek. "Mr. Landry," she said, voice now flat, "you will not look at this child again unless it is through the restrictions of a court order." Derek's jaw tightened. "Your Honor, this is—" Judge Arden cut him off. "No," she said. "This is an emergency." She turned to the clerk. "I am granting an emergency protective order, effective immediately," she said. "The minor will be placed under temporary protection today. No contact from Mr. Landry, no contact by proxy, no access to her school, no access to her phone, no access to her residence." Jade's knees almost buckled. Judge Arden continued, and given the documented harm, this court will also authorize immediate civil petitioning for damages and restitution in the amount requested pending full evidentiary proceedings. Her gavel struck once, final, and for the first time in 3 years, Jade felt something she didn't recognize at first because her body was so used to fear. Relief, not safety yet, but the first crack in the wall. If you're wondering how a teenager ends up holding proof in her hands like a life raft, how a hidden diary and a handful of photos can flip a courtroom in minutes, you have to rewind, back to a small house where silence was treated like obedience, back to the kind of hardship that doesn't always look like poverty. Sometimes it looks like reputation. Jade grew up learning 2 versions of her mother, Keisha. One was warm, the version that sang in the kitchen on good days, the version that braided Jade's hair before school, the version that kissed her forehead and called her baby girl, like nothing could touch them. The other version was tired enough to be sharp, tired enough to choose peace with an adult man over peace with a child. When Keisha met Derek Landry, Jade was 11. Derek was charming in public, helpful, polite, always offering to carry groceries, always shaking hands like he wanted to be liked. He wasn't loud, he wasn't sloppy, he wasn't the stereotype people expect. He was controlled, and control can be more dangerous than chaos because it knows how to hide. At first, Derek was strict. He insisted Jade keep her room clean. He criticized her tone. He watched her like a supervisor, not a stepfather. Keisha said, "He just wants you to succeed." Jade tried to believe that, because believing was easier than resisting. But strict didn't stay strict. It sharpened. Derek started making comments that sounded small, but landed heavy. "Girls like you end up in trouble," he'd say. "Don't get fast. Don't get cute." Jade didn't fully understand what he meant at first, but she understood the feeling, being watched, not as a child, as something else. Keisha dismissed Jade's discomfort as attitude. "You don't like anyone I date," she'd say. "Stop being jealous." Jade stopped arguing, because arguing didn't change anything. It just made Derek smile in that small, satisfied way, like conflict proved he was right to tighten control. The first time Derek hurt Jade, it wasn't a punch. It was a grip, a hard squeeze of her arm in the hallway, because Jade had left a cup on the counter. "Do you think I'm your maid?" Derek whispered, face close, voice low. Jade flinched, surprised by pain. Keisha saw it happen. Keisha didn't intervene. She just said, "Jade, listen." And in that one sentence, Jade learned a rule that would govern the next 3 years. The house would protect Derek first, even when Jade was the one getting hurt. After that, Derek got smarter. He didn't hurt Jade where people could see easily. He didn't leave obvious marks every time. He used isolation. He used threats. He used consequences that didn't look like abuse to outsiders. Phone taken, door removed, food restricted, school activities cancelled. Then, when he did put his hands on her, he framed it as discipline. Keisha repeated that framing like a prayer she needed to survive her own choices. "He's trying to keep you out of trouble," she'd say. Jade started to feel like her life was an argument she couldn't win, so she stopped trying to win. She started trying to endure. At 13, Jade tried to tell someone, not the police, not a counselor, just her aunt, Ms. Rochelle, at a family cookout. Jade waited until the adults were laughing and music was loud, until she could pull her aunt aside behind the house, where the smell of grilled meat mixed with cut grass. "Auntie," Jade whispered, "I don't want to go home." Rochelle's face softened. "What's going on, baby?" Jade's throat tightened. She could hear Derek's voice in her head already. "Say anything and you'll regret it." Jade forced the words out anyway. "He gets mad," she said. "He grabs me. He says stuff." Rochelle's eyes narrowed. "What kind of stuff?" Jade hesitated. Stuff about my body, she whispered. Rochelle's face went hard. Have you told your mom? Jade shook her head quickly. She won't believe me, she said. She'll get mad at me. Rochelle inhaled sharply and stood up like she was ready to go to war. Jade grabbed her wrist. Please, Jade whispered. Don't. Not right now. Rochelle froze, then crouched down to Jade's level. Why? She asked gently. Jade's voice broke. Because I have to go back, she whispered. And if you say something, it'll be worse. That sentence is the one adults don't understand until they've seen it. When a child refuses help, it's not because they don't want safety, it's because they don't trust what happens after the adult leaves. Rochelle hugged Jade hard, but the hug didn't solve the problem, because Rochelle didn't have legal authority, and Keisha didn't want to hear anything that threatened her relationship. So Jade went home, and the system, family, school, community, kept moving like nothing was wrong. That's when Jade started writing, not because she wanted to be poetic, because she needed something to hold on to. When you're being told your reality isn't real, you start doubting yourself. You start thinking maybe you imagined it, maybe you deserved it, maybe you're too sensitive. Maybe you're the problem. A diary becomes a mirror when no one else will reflect the truth back to you. Jade hid the notebook inside a hollowed-out textbook she kept under her bed. She wrote dates, short descriptions, what he said, what he did, where it hurt, where she hid the bruises. She didn't write like an author. She wrote like a witness. She wrote the way people write when they don't know if they'll ever get to speak out loud. The photos came later, not because Jade wanted to catch him, because her body couldn't stop being evidence. It started with a bruise on her upper arm shaped like a thumb. Jade stared at it in the bathroom mirror and felt a strange, numb anger. She didn't want to look at it, but she also didn't want to forget it, so she used her old phone, an outdated model Keisha had given her after upgrading, one Derek didn't bother monitoring because it didn't have service. It still had a camera. Jade took one picture, then another. She deleted nothing. She created a hidden folder and renamed it something boring, homework. Then she printed them at a pharmacy kiosk after school once, heart pounding as the machine whirred. She paid in cash she'd saved from lunch money. When the print slid out, warm from the printer, Jade felt like she was holding proof in her hands. It was terrifying, and it was empowering, because proof doesn't require permission. Derek sensed Jade pulling away. Abusers often do. They don't need to read minds. They read behavior. They read the way someone stops flinching the same way. They read the way someone stops begging. They read the way someone gets quiet in a different tone. One night, Derek confronted Jade in the kitchen while Keisha was at work. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice. He stood close enough that Jade could smell his cologne. "You're getting brave," he said softly. Jade felt her stomach drop. "I don't know what you mean," she whispered. Derek smiled slightly. "I mean you're forgetting who runs this house," he said. Jade swallowed hard. "My mom?" Derek cut her off. "Your mom runs nothing," he said, voice still quiet. "Your mom wants peace, and she'll choose it." Jade's chest tightened. Derek leaned closer. "You ever bring anyone in here?" he whispered, "and you'll learn what real consequences feel like." Jade's hands shook. Derek stepped back like nothing had happened. Then he said the sentence that kept Jade awake for weeks. "And nobody's going to believe you anyway." He didn't say it with anger. He said it like fact, and that's what made it stick. Because Jade had already felt disbelief before she even spoke. Adults had already labeled her moody, dramatic, troubled. A black teen girl with attitude, a story people think they already know. Derek was counting on that. The escalation came fast after that. Derek started taking Jade's diary, searching seriously, rifling through her room when she was at school, questioning her about where she kept secrets. Keisha noticed Jade's panic and responded the wrong way. "Why are you acting guilty?" Keisha snapped one night. Jade stared at her mother, breathing shallow. "I'm not guilty," Jade whispered. "I'm scared." Keisha rolled her eyes. "Scared of what?" she demanded. Jade's throat tightened. "Of him," she said. Keisha's face changed, not into concern, into anger. "Don't say that," Keisha hissed. "He pays the bills. He's been good to us. You're not going to ruin this because you're mad you don't get your way." Ruin this. Jade felt something inside her go cold, not because she stopped loving her mother, because she understood her mother's priorities, and once you understand that, the world becomes clearer in a way that hurts. Jade stopped trying to convince Keisha. She started planning how to survive until she could leave. But leaving at 16 isn't simple, and Derek knew that, so he tightened the cage. The turning point came at school, in a place Jade had never considered safe, the nurse's office. Jade went in with a headache she didn't have, just to sit somewhere quiet for 10 minutes. The school nurse, Ms. Patel, glanced up and noticed Jade's sleeves pulled down, even though it was warm outside. "Can I check your temperature?" Ms. Patel asked. Jade nodded, eyes down. As the nurse wrapped the cuff around Jade's arm, the sleeve rode up slightly. A bruise flashed. Ms. Patel's hand paused. Her voice stayed calm. "What happened?" she asked gently. Jade's throat tightened. "I bumped into something," Jade said, automatically. Ms. Patel didn't push hard. She didn't accuse. She just said, "Okay." Then softly, she added, "You know you can talk here." Jade's eyes stung. She wasn't ready to talk fully, but she was ready to not be alone. So Jade did something small. She slid a folded piece of paper from her pocket onto the nurse's desk. It had one sentence written on it. "I don't feel safe at home." Ms. Patel's face changed, not into shock, into action. She called the school counselor. She documented the bruise. She followed protocol. And in a world where Jade had been told nobody would believe her, a nurse did the simplest, powerful thing. She wrote it down. The next week became chaos. CPS visits, interviews, Keisha crying and insisting Jade was lying, Derek calm and offended, acting like the victim of a misunderstanding. Jade was interviewed in a small room with a social worker who asked questions like a checklist. Jade tried to answer, but fear made her words collapse. And when fear collapses words, adults can mistake it for inconsistency. Derek used that. He told CPS Jade was the unstable. Keisha backed him. "She's been acting out," Keisha said. "She makes up stories when she's mad." The social worker looked tired. She didn't dismiss Jade outright, but she didn't remove her either. Not yet, because removal requires evidence, and evidence takes time, and time is what trapped kids don't have. Jade went home that day and felt the house close around her. Keisha screamed at her for bringing strangers into our business. Derek didn't scream. He waited until Keisha left the room. Then he leaned close to Jade and whispered, "Now you're really going to learn." That night, Jade didn't sleep. She lay on her bed, listening to the floorboards creak. She thought about Rochelle. She thought about Ms. Patel. She thought about the diary under the bed. And she realized something terrifying. If she stayed, she might not make it to 18. Not because she would be killed, because she would be erased piece by piece. So she made a choice, not to run away, to go to court. Jade didn't have a lawyer. She didn't know procedures. But Ms. Patel connected her with a youth advocacy clinic that handled emergency protective petitions for minors. A legal aid attorney named Nadine Brooks met Jade after school in a small office that smelled like paper and hand sanitizer. Nadine didn't ask Jade to perform. She asked Jade to tell her story like she believed it mattered. When Jade hesitated, Nadine said something that hit Jade like warmth. "You don't have to convince me you deserve protection," Nadine said. "You just have to tell me what happened." Jade's eyes filled. Then she spoke, not perfectly, not in a straight line, but honestly. When Jade mentioned the diary, Nadine's tone stayed steady. "Do you still have it?" she asked. Jade nodded. "And photos?" Nadine asked. Jade swallowed. "Yes." Nadine leaned forward. "Okay," she said. "We're filing. For emergency protection. But Jade, you need to understand something." Jade stared at her. Nadine's voice softened. "Once you do this," she said, "the house will fight back. Your mother may deny you, your stepfather may accuse you, but the court can protect you if we bring proof." "Proof?" Jade nodded. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were steady. "I have proof," she whispered. That's how Jade ended up standing in Judge Arden's courtroom with a backpack that held her life in paper form. That's how a diary that had been written in the dark became evidence in the light. That's how photos taken in silence became louder than any argument. And when Judge Arden granted the emergency protective order, it wasn't because she was moved by emotion. It was because the documentation created a pattern. Dates, consistency, corroboration with school nurse notes, text messages from Keisha, and bruises that matched the timeline. The court moved fast because it had to. Because when a child shows up with proof, the question isn't, "Is this inconvenient?" The question is this dangerous? And the answer, in Jade's case, was yes. Emergency protection was the first step, not the end. Jade was placed temporarily with her Aunt Rochelle under court supervision. Keisha fought it immediately, filing motions claiming Jade was manipulated and brainwashed. Derek claimed defamation. He claimed Jade was trying to destroy a good man. He threatened lawsuits. He tried to contact Jade through friends. Judge Arden shut it down. No contact orders were expanded. Violations were warned as criminal, and the court ordered a full evidentiary hearing with sworn testimony. During that process, more proof surfaced, not just Jade's diary. School counselor notes about Jade's fear, a teacher's email documenting Jade flinching when adults raised voices, a neighbor's statement about hearing, yelling late at night, a pharmacy receipt showing Jade had printed photos months before, meaning she hadn't invented the story last week. The pattern grew, and patterns don't care how charming an adult is. The damages came later, through a civil claim filed by Nadine's clinic in coordination with a partner firm, because Jade's case wasn't only about safety, it was about harm, physical harm, psychological harm, educational disruption, medical expenses, therapy, and the court recognized that even after the protective order, Jade had costs she would carry into adulthood. Derek's counsel tried to discredit the diary as creative writing. The judge didn't accept that, because diaries can be fabricated, but fabrication doesn't usually come with matching bruises, matching school documentation, matching timestamps, and matching photographs. Keisha tried to claim she was a victim too. In some ways, she may have been. But the court's job wasn't to comfort adults, it was to protect a child. Judge Arden's ruling in the civil phase was blunt. She awarded damages for harm. She included punitive elements due to threats and intimidation. Total, $2 million, not because money fixes trauma, because the court needed consequences to match the scale of the harm and to fund the long road of recovery Jade would need. People often ask what happens to a teen after a ruling like that. Do they feel free? Do they feel happy? Do they feel healed? Jade didn't feel any of those things immediately. She felt tired. She felt like her nervous system had been running a marathon with no finish line. She had nightmares. She startled when doors closed too hard. She hated being touched unexpectedly. She laughed at jokes and then cried in the bathroom for reasons she couldn't name. But she also had something she'd never had before: control over her own life. She started therapy with a trauma specialist. She got a new phone number. She got a new school schedule. She got a bedroom where no one could come in without her permission. And slowly, she began learning what safe feels like, not as a concept, but as a physical reality. One afternoon, months later, Jade sat at Rochelle's kitchen table, doing homework, sunlight pooling on the wood like it belonged there. Rochelle slid a glass of water toward her. Jade looked up and said quietly, "Do you think I'm a bad person?" Rochelle's face tightened. "Why would you ask that?" she said. Jade stared at her pencil. "Because my mum keeps saying I ruined everything," Jade whispered. Rochelle leaned forward, voice steady. "You didn't ruin anything," she said. "You exposed it." Jade's eyes filled. Rochelle continued, gentler now. "The only people who ruin things are the people who harm and then demand silence." Jade inhaled, shaky. For the first time, she let herself believe that sentence. Jade didn't use the money like people imagine. She didn't buy a flashy car. She didn't post a victory online. She set up a protected trust through court supervision so no one could exploit it. She paid for therapy, tutoring, college prep, medical care. She took a summer program in journalism because she had learned something about truth. Truth doesn't just save one person. Truth creates a trail other people can follow. And when she turned 18, Jade did something that felt symbolic without being dramatic. She took the diary, the one that had held her pain, and she placed it in a locked box, not because she was ashamed, because she didn't want to live in it forever. She kept copies of the evidence for legal reasons, but she stopped rereading the pages. She didn't need to keep bleeding to prove she was hurt. That was the difference between surviving and living. If you're listening to Jade's story and thinking it's just about a diary and photos, it's not. It's about a teenager who learned the adult world often believes the adult first. It's about how easy it is for a controlling person to hide behind calm. It's about how a child can become invisible in a home full of people. And it's about what happens when that child refuses to stay invisible. Jade didn't win because she had perfect words. She won because she documented, because she found one adult, Ms. Patel, who treated a bruise like a signal, not an inconvenience, because she found one lawyer, Nadine, who treated her fear like evidence, not drama, because when the truth finally arrived in court, it arrived with dates and photos and a voice that didn't ask permission anymore. So here's the question worth sitting with. How many kids are out there right now who are being told nobody will believe them? And how many adults are walking past the quiet signs? Long sleeves, sudden silence, flinches, because they don't want to imagine what those signs might mean. Jade's story isn't meant to make you paranoid. It's meant to make you attentive, because sometimes the difference between tragedy and protection isn't a heroic rescue. It's a nurse who writes it down, a counselor who follows up, a judge who reads an email, a court that finally sees a teenager not as dramatic, not as troubled, not as a stereotype, but as a human being holding proof and asking for the one thing every child deserves: safety. And when Judge Arden granted emergency protection, it didn't erase what Jade had survived, but it did one crucial thing. It stopped the next page from being written in the same handwriting. It gave Jade space to write a different ending, one where her voice didn't have to hide, one where her life wasn't controlled by someone else's threats, one where the backpack she carried into court wasn't a secret anymore. It was a turning point, and Jade walked out of that courthouse with something she hadn't had in 3 years. Not just an order, not just damages, a future that belonged to her.